All right, we're going to record another one. Just a little tidbit about salamander limb regeneration. Why? Because I thought it was interesting, that's why. Salamander limb regeneration. Right, so the question with salamander limb regeneration is, first and foremost, how do they do it? Because, you know, it'd be cool if people could regenerate limbs, or if we could understand how it is that various creatures, including like crabs and what were they called? Hydra, which are like weird two-layer pond-dwelling things. We don't need to worry about them too much. How these organisms regenerate, right? How they regrow substantial parts of themselves, right? How they become complete when you've cut off a limb, how do lizards regrow their tails and things like this. And this whole kind of sector of science is kind of still developing. We're still understanding, for example, how salamanders do it, and that's a reasonably recent piece of research. And so, how do they do it? How do they regrow limbs? Where do the stem cells come from? And so, like, you have your salamander limb, right? Yeah, you got little fingers, right? Right, and it gets removed. And we want to know where the stem cells for that limb come from. So have a little think in your brain for a second how you would work out where those stem cells come from. The way that researchers did it, spoiler, is that they, through tracking the progress of cells in the embryo all the way out to full development, they were able to determine where those particular cells end up. So, for example, we worked out that that's your embryo, right? It was determined that this little part on the endoderm, leads to skeletal muscle of that arm, right? So this part leads to the muscle of this arm, right? Now then, they took this embryo and they modified it such that it was green. Modified it so that it glowed green, right? So it's green. And this whole embryo is green, right? And then they took this part of the green embryo and they put it into a normal embryo, right? So a normal embryo. But in the normal embryo, you just have this arm, which is green, right? You can see it. Let me go over this side. Right, so here's embryo which has a green arm, right? And now we cut off the arm and we want to know whether or not the arm, where it gets its stem cells from, how the arm gets its stem cells. So think about the implications of this experiment for a second, right? If we cut off that arm and it regrows to be a normal color, that means that the stem cells for that arm are coming from the host, are coming from the normal embryo cells, which are non-coloured. Where, on the other hand, if they grow back to be green, we know they're coming from this modified part of the embryo, right? So we do the experiment, knock out the arm, and this was already a green and muscled area, right, before we cut it off. And then it grew back, and of course, it had green muscle. The whole thing wasn't green, it had green muscle. The bone was still normal, right? So it had green muscle. But what does that mean, right? That means that the regrowth, the stem cells, are coming, in fact, from the muscle cells that were already there, right? So as it regrows, the tissues that regenerate actually produce the stem cells for their given tissues in the new arm. So your connective tissues will produce stem cells for connective tissues, your muscles, your, not neurons, but your your other tissues in that body produce those stem cells. And that's interesting for various reasons in our regenerative medicine. And it's a fun little tidbit about how salamanders regrow their limbs. Thanks, guys.